I think over the last couple of classes, we've started with professional responsibilities or standards which applies to an auditor. So we did 2 sessions on that. Professional responsibilities or standards which an auditor must follow. Standards which auditor must follow. In the last session, we discussed planning the audit, including fraud risk assessment. Planning the audit, including fraud risk assessment. Now we'll be starting our audit. We have understood what are the responsibilities which applies to us. We have understood how we plan the audit. Once the planning is done, we start with the fieldwork stage. This is where we perform the audit. In performing the audit, we'll first do internal control testing. Then we will go with substantive testing. After that, we go with audit opinions. We'll discuss audit opinions and reports. So that's the entire audit cycle. Post that, we'll discuss sampling and other residual engagements such as SSARS, SSAE, governmental audit. But if this is the entire audit cycle, can we figure out where, which stage we are and why we are going in this chronology and how this chronology makes sense? We have understood the responsibilities which we need to comply as an auditor. We have planned our entire audit engagement. Our engagement letter has been signed. Now we start the audit. When we start the audit, we start with internal control testing. And over the next couple of sessions, we'll be talking about internal control testing. So that's the stage of the audit where we are at. Is that clear? Now, it's very important to understand the entire audit flow, entire audit cycle, so that it makes sense to us. Now, let's talk about internal controls. How do we use internal controls in audit? Before we go into that, let's understand what internal controls are. These are the transaction cycles which we'll be doing later. But let's understand what internal controls are first of all. And why do we consider them in audit? And how do we consider them in audit? So, in internal controls, firstly, we'll answer questions what internal controls are. Why do we consider them in the audit? Why do we consider internal controls in audit? How do we consider internal controls in audit? And how do we perform control testing? All these steps we will look at. How to perform control testing. These are the questions we will answer today. Now, what is internal control? First, let's answer that. Internal control is essentially any rule, any process in place which will stop or prevent errors from happening. So, for example, and because we are auditing and because we are doing financial audits, we are mostly concerned about internal controls over financial reporting. However, controls could be anywhere. Let's start with some basic controls. The door lock, the alarm system which we have for our houses, that is again an internal control. The lock on our cell phones, the passwords, the PIN which we have for our, let's just say, banking systems, for the various apps which we use, those are internal controls because they stop unauthorized access from happening. The fire system which we have, the fire alarm system, the fire sprinkler system which we have, those are internal controls because they prevent loss in case of fire. The smoke detectors are again internal controls. The CCTV cameras installed to detect who is accessing what is also internal controls. However, because we are conducting a financial audit, we are more concerned about internal controls over financial reporting, which is ICFR. Now, ICFR essentially prevents and detects frauds and misstatements from happening. These are procedures and policies. ICFR is essentially procedures and policies to prevent and detect frauds and misstatements from happening. The examples of these controls could be review of a journal entry, before it is posted, that is internal controls over financial reporting. Credit check of a customer before a sale is approved. Bank reconciliation statements. These are all examples of internal control over financial reporting. Now, we are concerned primarily about ICFR. These are not all the controls, but we are concerned only controls over financial reporting. The objectives of internal controls. There are three objectives: accurate and reliable financial reporting, compliance with applicable laws and regulations, effective and efficient business operations. These are the three objectives of internal control. So are we clear with what internal controls is and what the objectives of internal controls are? Now, there are five components of internal controls, five key components of internal controls. Now, this is something which we discuss in BC in extreme details. We go over each of the nitty gritties of control environment, risk assessment, control activities, monitoring, and ICFR and information communication in BEC in details. In fact, we take up examples into it. However, for audit, the topics, the questions they'll be testing us is not on internal controls, rather, how do we consider them in audit? So our objective is to figure out how do we consider internal controls in audit. The in-depth study of internal controls happens in BEC. Now, there are five components of internal control. First of all, this internal control which we are studying is given out by COSO, which is Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Tradeway Commission. They have given us the internal control framework. Now, they gave out the framework first in 2019. And again, what we are studying is the updated 2013 framework. So, the internal control framework which we are studying now